Hi everyone. I'm going to read the introduction to a little known version of Snow White, which is told and retold on dark winter nights in the northernmost expanses of the planet Earth by the Innuit people. As a child, I was absolutely obsessed with two things. The first was the word hinterland. The second, writing letters to people. This curious pair of obsessions eventually led me to Greenland, ever fearful that there was a great grey ghoul living under my bed in my bedroom. I used to throw myself into a world of fabulous imagination, a surefire way to divert my attention. Thinking of hinterlands, and in particular of Greenland's immense Arctic hinterland, caused me to forget the great grey ghoul as I drifted off to sleep. With closed eyes, I would whisper Greenland and hinterland over and over. And moments later, I'd be racing low above the tundra, the great grey ghoul, a distant memory. In time, and with my parents' hope that I would progress from being an imbecile, I was encouraged to write letters to people. A strategy to conquer my dyslexia, they encouraged me to write at least one letter every evening before I went to bed. It was an activity that I absolutely adored because I had so much to tell other people. As I was concerned, everyone out there in the big, wide world needed to be kept abreast of what was going on at our home, Langton House. The lesser reason to write letters was that people wrote back. There was nothing I enjoyed more than receiving letters from distant climes, especially ones that came in envelopes festooned with postage stamps. This was how I began a correspondence with an Inuit boy named Salek, who was my age and who, like me, was in urgent need of pen friends. It was my aunt who found him. She sent me a tiny advertisement ripped from a local newspaper. It said, "Want a pen pal in Greenland? Yes? Then write to me, Salek, at the address below." Yes, I did want a pen pal in Greenland. I couldn't think of anything better, so I wrote to Salek. I told him all about my sisters, about my parents, and about our rather unconventional lives at Langton House. I told him about the cats too, and about our yellow Labrador, and even about the chickens we kept in a coop at the end of the garden. My mother warned that Salek might be frightened away at receiving such a long letter first time round. But as I'd written 10 sheets, I sent them all. About a month passed, and I began to curse Salek for not writing back. Then, just as I had given up all hope, a letter arrived. It was from Greenland. The stamps were big and important, each one bearing the jagged outline of the landmass, the mysterious hinterland brooding darkly on each one. Opening the envelope, I read the very precise letter from Salek. Like me, his handwriting was uneven, and like me, he seemed preoccupied with detail. But whereas I rambled on in prose, Salek was a list maker. His first communication provided the following numbered points. 1. My name is Salek. 2. I am 11 and a half. 3. I go to a small school, but I do not like it. 4. I have a dog which has 3 feet. The 4th foot was cut off in a trap. 5. One day I will go away from Greenland and I will never come back. Over the years we corresponded, Salik delivered a wealth of information about Inuit culture, all of it revealed in numbered point form. The majority of the material supplied related to myths and to folklore, an area that delighted my overly developed sense of imagination. Salik's letters informed me about Sedna, the goddess of the sea, who was a curious form of mermaid. They informed me too about Nanook, the king of the Arctic, master of all polar bears. And they told me about the quests Inuit people made in their dreams, journeys far more dangerous than any in the waking world. One day, the letters from Greenland stopped without warning. I wrote time again, but Salik never ever wrote back. More than 30 years passed. I would often find myself thinking about my Inuit pen friend and about his 3-footed dog, wondering why he would have gone silent like that. Then, out of the blue, a travel magazine editor dispatched me to Greenland to write a piece on the vast, uncompromising hinterland. I remember packing for the trip. As someone who lived in Morocco and who was utterly averse to the cold, I had very little in the way of warm winter clothing. I tossed as many layers as I could muster into a duffel bag along with an assortment of maps. A taxi arrived to take me to Casablanca's airport. I was about to clamber in when something coaxed me to pause. Salik. Rushing back inside the Khalifa, I hurried upstairs, ran through to the small storage room beside my bedroom and rummaged around in one of the drawers, fishing out a clump of envelopes. Tied together with an old bootlace, I ran back to the taxi. The capital of Greenland is called Nuuk, and it had the feel of a long-forgotten outpost clinging to the surface of a distant planet in outer space. Perched awkwardly on the western edge of the landmass, it seemed ready for an immediate evacuation. For 2 weeks I crisscrossed the hinterland, relishing the glacial beauty and the emptiness of it all. I rode on sleds pulled by dogs. I learnt how to cut an ice hole on a frozen lake. And best of all, I learned about the folklore of the Inuit people. Each night, by the light of a kerosene lamp, I would read Salik's letters, or rather I would read his numbered points. They heaved me backwards through decades to a time of innocence. The day before returning to Nuuk, I showed my guide the return address written on the back of one of Salik's letters. "It's easy to find," he said. I wondered whether Salik's family could still live there. By any standards, it was a long shot, but I have forged a life for myself on long shots. So, having reached the capital, Nuuk, the next afternoon, I dropped my luggage off at the guest house and strolled a short distance over ice-laden pavements to Sakaralit Street. As I walked, I turned a prepared opening sentence over in my mind, checking the exact address on one of the envelopes. I strode up to a rather nondescript wooden house, bolted down onto the drab grey rock. Without allowing myself a chance to rethink or overthink, I knocked. No answer. Shrugging, I was about to turn on my heel and leave when I heard a voice inside. A voice was calling out. I waited and swallowed hard. The front door opened inwards. A slim, balding man, about my own age, was standing in its frame. "When I was a child," I said, "I used to write letters to a boy who lived here. His name was Salik, and he had a dog with 3 feet. The man regarded me with an intensity. Blotto, he said matter-of-factly. The dog's name was Blotto, and I am Salak. I held up the clutch of envelopes, each one bearing jagged landmass postage stamps. In what seemed like slow motion, Salak smiled. It wasn't the subtle, wry smile you so often glimpse in Scandinavia, but a rip-roaring extravaganza of a smile from further south. When the lips had finished smiling, they spoke my name. A strong hug between a pair of 11-and-a-half-year-old boys followed. Then I was ushered inside. Salak apologized for the mess and the clutter. He made tea, and he smiled widely again. As I sat on the sofa and thanked Providence, he hurried away to hunt through boxes. A short time later, he emerged, a cluster of letters in his hand. Letters written in my own spidery script. Late into the evening, we read the letters aloud, chatted, and laughed. When it was time to leave, I padded through the house to the front door. Pausing on the mat, I turned to Salak, the joy draining from my smile. I have something to ask you, I said pointedly. To ask me? What? Why did you stop writing? His eyes glazed over. Salak lowered his head apologetically. My father lost his job on the fishing trawler, he told me. We had to cut back, and the first thing to go were expensive postage stamps. Next day, we had lunch together at an outside restaurant, rinsed in the blinding sunshine of a pristine autumn afternoon. I reminded Salak how he had told me about Nanook, king of the Arctic, master of all polar bears. He smiled, sipped a beer, and smiled again. Greenland is all about stories, he said. Look around you, there's almost nothing else. We don't have impressive skyscrapers or even modern shopping malls, but we have the tales that are passed down. Do you have a favorite? I asked him. Salak placed the beer glass down on the table and thought very hard. The tale of Kanitak and the 7 hunters, he said. I leaned forward. Do you remember how it goes? Salak moistened both lips with the tip of his tongue. I will tell it to you, he said.